Hola, hola, and buenos dias, GnGs. My name is Trekkw2ks, and welcome to another episode of Weekend Crypto, brought to you here on the Gem of the Crypto Network. So, if you don't know, the basic idea is I cover crypto news that happens between Friday and Sunday, spit it out 08 on a Monday morning, and I do it with a filter of no price talk. So, I don't do nothing about degen tokens, I don't do nothing about pump and dumps, I don't do nothing about what I'm holding, none of that talk here. We do got other folks who do it. So, Rule Black, King does his stuff, Zay does his stuff too when they're on in the morning. The Stack Bros, they do their thing too. Simon family does their thing. Sorry about that. And yeah, so I'm not the one. Sorry, but not sorry. Nonetheless, I do try to provide some observational perspective on the things that I see as trends, indicators, and patterns of events happening in this space. For those of you who are new to my segment, for those of you who've been following me for a minute, I appreciate y'all coming back. This is the first episode of the new year. I got a number of stories to tell. Not everything is apparent to me, but some of these things still do scratch my brain in a certain way. And for the new folks finding me, thank y'all. Hopefully y'all will come back. I do appreciate you taking the time to listen. The lurkers, always appreciate y'all because y'all make the numbers do what they do. The scammers, I respect what y'all do. I'm hoping nobody gets caught out there slipping because we are in the season. Because we going into the tax stuff right now, if you don't know. And so with that, let me roll into this segment is brought to you by CJ, the smart guy. He is a CPA. Full disclosure, he is my CPA, but that is not the reason why I'm telling you about him. I'm telling you about him because if you've been listening to the stuff that I've been talking about over the last couple of months, been doing this for more than 2 years as far as this segment, the crypto space is definitely falling back into the general fold of the IRS. Okay? I don't know what you've done. I know what I had did, the mistakes that I've made, and I definitely needed to do certain things to get myself aligned to not have certain issues, let's say. And so whatever it is y'all are doing out there, you want to cross your T's and dot your I's. Having a CPA might be one of those things. Not saying you have to use this guy, but at least find your resources. Do your due diligence, okay? Link for his stuff will be in the description, and there's no kickback. I'm not getting no payoff. There's no referral link, none of that. This is just me sharing his stuff. And full disclosure, he is my actual CPA, okay? And so next thing to say is Happy New Year. It's the first episode, and I got some things, like I said, we're going to jump into. And yeah, hopefully everybody had a good, safe night. You were at least in good company. It's 2024, y'all. It's definitely about to go down, right? So let's move on to this next thing. Here we go. All right, here we go. So this is the first story. Argentina president passes friendly tax regime for crypto assets. I'm saying it wrong. I know the word. I'm horrible at times at words. So I'm still not on one side or the other with this dude. He's doing things that seem very, quote, liberal, label wise, and then he's doing other things that are like, quote, conservative. Like he let go like over 1,000 people in the government in the first day. Okay, but then he says stuff like we're doing dollarization and we're not going to join the BRICS anymore. If you don't know about the BRICS, that's BRICS. So what is that? Brazil, our state, that's a country, the place dealing with the Ukraine thing. The C state, no, what is that? India, the C state, and then South Africa. And it's going to be like another 5 countries later on this year. Point being is he does this thing where he's basically saying like, listen, it doesn't matter where you store it. It doesn't matter how you're holding it. We're going to tax it. And we're going to do these increments of where it goes from 5 to 15% over the year and change. So it's a control escalation of the tax increase on whatever way you're possessing crypto. He's also doing it where he's not going crazy overboard with getting on the people locally, because he's not making a distinction like Brazil did, where it's like, hey, if you use a foreign exchange, we're going to tax you more. If you use a local exchange, we'll tax you less. So far, it doesn't seem like that's what he's doing. But there's also still the question of, will he be able to get this to pass and fully implemented? Because it seems like there might be some kickback. Other thing to note, Argentina was one of the countries that, last year, re-upped on their deal with the IMF. X amount of the conditions in the IMF contract was to not do crypto things, in particular for Bitcoin. So the question in my mind is like, what is this guy doing? Because he's also one of the WEF people, World Economic Forum people. It's either WEF or IMS. He's one of them folks. He's connected to one of those groups. So this has me kind of like, what is going on here? We'll see how it plays out during the year and going forward. It seems as though there are certain Latin American leadership folks who are trying to do their part to make their regions, their countries stand out. So we see Costa Rica, we see El Salvador, we see Argentina, and I'm gonna even include Puerto Rico. Okay, arguably this could be a good thing. Granted, he hasn't done anything like saying that Bitcoin is legal tender, even though you can settle contracts in crypto. I don't remember if it was specifically Bitcoin, but it's still a distinction between you being able to use Bitcoin as legal tender versus settling a contract agreement in crypto or Bitcoin. Anywho, that's happened. That came out over the weekend. Again, we'll see how it plays out. Indicator of expect more folks in Latin America to start moving on this wave. Okay. Next joint here is Coinbase custody changes leadership ahead of the Bitcoin ETF decision. So at this point, it was a number of stories that were basically repeating the same thing of the ETF thing is happening at some point within next year. Considering that Congress never really does anything in the January month and everything starts like snowballing after Martin Luther King Day, I guess we'll see something within the first quarter. So it shouldn't go past the end of February. If it gets into March to happen, it's one of those like, oh, okay. But from what it seems like, everyone is setting their players in position. So case in point with Coinbase custody, their thing is the new guy that they're going to bring in, what's his name? Rick Schoenberg. He has the Goldman Sachs, the Wall Street connections. He used to work on that side. So the ETF thing would be his realm, right? A lot of what we're going to see as we progress into the year is, and I said it during the summertime when it was happening, there were new hires who were traditional TradFi people. I'm repeating the traditional, but basically folks who were from Wall Street and that realm were being poached over into the crypto side, crypto-related companies. And we're going to start to see where the money pays off for what their salaries are as we move into this decade. I'm not saying this to you as price talk. I'm not saying this to you as a CPA, a financial advisor, a lawyer. It's just, here's these indicators that are making patterns of the crypto-related projects who want to be a part of TradFi, or who want to be the 2.0 or the 3.0 quote Web3 version of TradFi institutions. They're going to start bringing in, if they have not already acquired those people who come from that realm. We'll see more names as we go forward, is the point. That's why I brought this story up. All right, so this joint happened. South Korea National Assembly members purchased nearly $50 million worth of crypto in 3 years. So why did I bring this story up? I bring it up for a couple of reasons, because there are a couple of things that cross my mind when I think about this story. One, the way that they did this was, like us, South Korea has the whole thing of where their elected officials have to do some level of declaration of like, here's what my finances look like. Unlike how ours worked out, where we have you just report it when you report it. Granted, there's supposed to be timelines of when you're supposed to report it. It doesn't mean that all of the Congress people actually do that on our side. There was an article I covered a couple of months back about how a number of people were not timely in their reporting of what they had. Some people were 6 months behind. Some people were 12 months behind. Some people were a little bit more than 12 months behind, right? And so here, what they did in South Korea was like, all right, we're just going to go and like start making an official investigation and see what's where, who's what, right? So the numbers went from 8 in 2022 to 17 by this year, right? So obviously that means more folks are catching on. The reason why this was brought up, because South Korea legislation wise has definitely been ahead of the US as far as making regulatory frameworks that allow the industry to grow and establish itself within its jurisdiction. And so the question is there any level of collusion or conflict of interest in these assembly members having some connections to exchanges or crypto-related companies? And so part of that was to see like, well, are we seeing a growth in the assembly body getting involved, yes, we're seeing a growth in that. I imagine at some point the somebody's going to dig in a little bit more to be like, all right, well, who's sitting on what committee, who's doing this as far as being a president or an advisory or a board member for some crypto related thing. It doesn't get that deep in the article. The way this breaks it down is just that they were noting that more people got involved and they're doing more different crypto assets compared to before. So, pardon. I expect to hear more of this from other countries. I imagine the C state will eventually do it. I think somebody just got arrested for, it's another story in here. The dude got a serious hefty prison sentence. But I'll get to that in a minute. The point is we're going to start to hear more of this as we go through the year, especially if this ETF thing happens the way everyone is kind of expecting it to, quote, jump off. And so some regulatory bodies are going to look to be like, hey, we're doing everything we're supposed to. There's no apparent conflict of interest. We're not fleecing the people, while others are just going to be sweeping stuff under the rug, honestly, right? That's how that's going to play out. But this is just something as an indicator of what will go out in 2024 in my mind, right? IMM in my mind. So here's this story. I did do a clickbait title as far as Gensler getting fired in 2024. So here's what the actual devil in the details part of it is, right? There are two Congress people. One is, what's his name? Warren Davison, who's a representative out of Ohio. And then there's Tom Emmer, who's a representative out of, I believe that is Maine. Both of these are Republican. Emmer is the one who's being touted as the crypto friendly guy. He's also against like the whole CBDC thing. And he's looking to make legislation for that. In my mind, I have a couple of things that are kind of scratching, right? One is this just a flash in the pan show? The reason why I say that is unless something serious comes out about Gensler this year, all of the congressional folks are going to be focused on the election. And they're going to also be focused on the situation with is it real and the U state. They're going to be focused on those three things and then X amount of the border stuff. But those three things will demand a lot of attention because a lot of folks are going to have to be doing a lot of sound bites. Okay. So it's just like, what support do these two gentlemen think they will actually get from their fellow congressional people? I wonder. Again, in my mind, it's like, is this just a show? And if we did a FOIA request for the communication between these two gentlemen, as well as individually to the SEC, what would we turn up? Were they giving them a heads up in the beginning of, hey, we're going to launch this thing. There's a bill that I'm working on, blah, 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 blah. We're looking to do this. Because what they want in this bill is to eliminate Gensler's position and only make it that it's 6 security exchanges, not executives, but it's like what Hester Pierce is. There's only going to be 6 of those. In my mind, it's like, I hear your intention, but I don't know how well this would execute if we actually were able to get rid of his position. There's a number of other things about how the SEC works that's just like, well, if the leadership is crappy, it doesn't matter what the underlings do. Case in point, the law case with BitBlocks and how the judge didn't release the frozen assets, even though it came out that the lawyer team was very misleading in how they presented getting the warrant to freeze the company's assets. But nonetheless, this is the situation as we look into 2024. I don't know. On my level of taking it serious, it's probably below a 5 as an indicator of anything, unless something serious comes out this year about the SEC, and it would probably have to be specifically about Gensler. Case in point, Sam Bankman-Friedman situation, DOJ is saying they're not pressing forward anymore. If something were to come out of that situation about his communication with Gensler, or at least one of the other congressional people who were connected to Gensler, that might be something to bring it above a 6-7. But for right now, I'm seeing it under a 5. I just wanted to throw it on a radar that there is legislation being proposed to remove him. Go on, do your due diligence on that and do with it what you will. Next joint. Developer alerts Ledger Live software could be tracking user ID, apps, and balances. So Record Builder is old school dude as far as being a tech supporter within the space, and he knows the coding stuff, he knows the backend things, he's worked with the various companies within the space, right? You can do your due diligence on him too. So his thing is like, hey, I started noticing when I look into the code that for how Ledger Live works, it is collecting and doing a whole bunch of other things every time you turn it on. You don't. So we're not talking about if you are looking or doing activity. We're just talking about when you turn it on, it does a number of things to fingerprint your device. If you're on the phone, it looks at what other apps you have. It identifies your IP address. It does a number of things. It's like, well, what does that have to do with being a cold storage for my crypto? I don't know, but he's not the only one calling it out. I throw this out there to you. Why? Because I said the other day, there's a story about the OFAC list and how, I forgot the name for the exchange. It's a California exchange that says, yes, we're censoring transactions. In my mind, IMM, this is sort of like a 51% attack because they're going after the validators to say, hey, don't process this address. Do not process anything that comes from this address, which when we initially came up with the proof of, not we, but when Satoshi and them came up with the proof of work as a consensus mechanism, the idea was that anyone could use the network. It was the whole thing of being able to do a peer-to-peer transaction, permissionless and unimpeded. Now what's happening is the way Ethereum works, because this is for the EVM side of the house, law enforcement and legislators, really a bureaucratic agency, is targeting the validators of the network to say, don't process these wallet address transactions, which is in turn censoring a person's ability for financial movement, right? As well as it's changing how the blockchains are being built as far as the history of them, right? And in basics, it is the longer chain is the right chain. Ethereum doesn't follow that. Vitalik's Ethereum does not follow that because of what happened in 2016. There's another story I have that kind of relates to this that I'll get into in a minute. But the point being is why I initially said the indicator to me of moving away from Ledger was because they are one of the entities within the crypto space that is censoring transactions based on the OFAC like blackout list. And there's a website that tracks all of the entities all of the companies and stuff that are blocking and censoring addresses. The link for that is in the last post. It's in the description of that. So if you're interested, want to do some due diligence and homework, that's where you could go for that link. It is in there. Point being is this to me is just adding into the momentum of Ledger is doing more than. Now, the logic behind it to me is pretty simple. It's a business. They have investors. They have people that they have to make a return for, right? And so you can't run on the same business model of just being cold storage because that's only going to pull you but so much money. You need to get into the other stuff, which is why they got into you can do exchanges and trading from your ledger, from your hard wallet, quote. Now they got to get into the other stuff because that's going to add into the revenue stream. So from the business sense, I'm not mad at them, but me looking at the space, how I'm looking at it going, all I need you to do is just be a cold storage wallet. I don't need you to do nothing else. That's it. I'm going to have to start working on my migration out of that platform. But it is what it is for right now. Hopefully you guys are paying attention for how you are doing your stuff. And let me throw this out there, like, not play devil's advocate, but put this in context of, for some folks, Ledger is pretty easy. It's smooth. It has a level of convenience that works for them, right? Where for other folks, it might be like their security factor, what they call the threat model, Ledger doesn't work for what's going on with what they do. For other folks, they're looking at it going, well, I got to think about if something happens to me and my loved ones or whoever I'm sending this to take it over, they don't have to be, a computer engineer or computer science person to understand how to move the funds or get things off or whatever. So there's a level of convenience there. That might work for some people. I'm not judging, not even smudging on this one. I'm just putting it in context of I understand why some people might look to stay where they are with it. But again, I'm throwing this out there as here's another indicator. Ledger has stuff going on with it that may not be the most copacetic place to be as we move forward in this decade. Just throwing it that way, y'all. Link for this will be in the description. If you disagree with me, not a problem. Live stream, live chat, we in here now. So, you know, you can say something. I'm with it. All right. So this story here is Indonesia authorities shut down Bitcoin mining operation over electricity theft. So the story to me is, how do I say this? So here you have it that, how do I say this? I've said this before as far as there are things that are said in a story and you have to like cross-reference it and think through it. And then there are things that are not said in the story. What gets me with this story is the things that are not said. So the basic idea is that a conglomerate, a few folks colluded together to start a Bitcoin mining operation. They did it over 10 locations. They had over 1,000 different miners. And basically, they were tapping in on the power source of the buildings before it got to the regulator that keeps track of how much power is being consumed. So that is part of what they get them on. I feel like there should be a technical rule that should be listed in this article for what they broke, but that's not what they do. They don't give you the technical rule or law that they broke. Okay. They just say that the amount of power they stole added up to like $1 million. The other thing to note is they don't tell you how much crypto they actually acquired. They don't tell you how long was the investigation going on, because this place ran for a number of years. So in my mind, it's just like, wait a minute, you're telling me that they had over 1,000 miners across different locations and nobody heard this? Nobody saw? Because they literally had cables that were up to like a couple of miles long. So it's just like, how did they move all of these resources into this place and nobody was paying attention? I don't know Indonesia like that. So I don't know if they were like out in a rural, like, you know, jungle, woods, whatever location, but they were someplace where they were able to tap into power and it was direct enough and sustainable enough for them to do this for a couple of years. Which brings me to the second point of, you're telling me that they did theft and that they were, quote, putting strain on the energy grid. But you don't tell me that there were any blackouts. You don't tell me that there were brownouts. You don't tell me that like fires or something happened, or that the way that the electrician person did it, it was hazardous. There's none of that in the story. But I also didn't look up the Indonesian source article to see where this actually came from. My point being is, this article to me is incomplete, but it is an indicator to show that going forward, you're going to hear of more situations in conglomerates like this being shut down. Why? Because in my mind, there's a level of like, yo, you didn't pay the local taxes like you were supposed to. Whoever that is, whether it be the government or the loan shark arm of the government or whatever it is. And then there's the other part of the operation might be connected to someone and someone's going after someone. Because at the end of the day, as far as this article is concerned, they don't even tell you who actually holds the crypto. They don't tell you that at all in this. So it's just one of those like, what is going on here, really? Again, these are the things that just scratch my brain. I'm not saying you have to pay attention to them. I'm not even saying that they'll be in your interest to know about. But these are just the things that scratch my brain, okay? And so I'm just leaving that one there with the conclusion of expect to hear more stories like this. All right. All right, next story. Former Monero lead maintainer calls on Binance to take a stance on privacy. So I read this and I'm like, all right, what's going on here? Who's doing this? So basically Fluffy Pony, who is one of the biggest personalities associated with Monero, is making comments about how Binance needs to take a more official stance on where they stand with privacy coins. for the way that this article is written, I am not 100% certain that he was actually in an interview saying this, where someone's asking him direct questions and he's just going like, yo, here's my thought on this, here's this, here's this, here's this. And why I say that is because it kind of puts him in a position of where he's ignorant of who's the guy in charge right now, as well as where the DOJ, the Department of Justice, a U.S. department, a U.S. law enforcement executive branch side department, sits in the operation of the building, of the company. I think personally that Binance is being used for something else and they're going to be slowly choked out over time. The person who's the CEO now, since they made CZ step down and they just said he can't go nowhere again, he's, I think, World Economic Forum connected or IMF connected. I don't remember which one it is. So in my mind, it's just like, why would you take this quote or two from Fluffy Pony that kind of puts him in an ignorant light, like he's not aware of who this new guy is? Because basically Binance is saying we're going to delist pretty much all of the known privacy coins. So it's like, what do you mean they need to take a stance? They're taking a stance, sir. It's pretty apparent that when you have the US government in your business at this level, in particular, at this level for Binance International, Binance US is in a whole nother category for itself, but Binance International at this point literally has the man, quote, just sitting on their shoulder, just every time they make a move. Oh, what you doing? Okay, cool. Oh, no, put that back. No, turn that off. Like, that's how it's going for them going forward. And then you have the guy on the other end who comes from these global bodies that are not about having privacy for the individual, especially in a financial sense, right? So again, I don't know what the point of this article is and why they wrote it the way they wrote it. Other than to say, is it a mislead thing? I don't know. Is there something else playing out in regards to Monero? I'm not 100% because I don't pay attention to all the stuff that's going on in that community. But arguably, especially considering that Fluffy Pony isn't one of the active maintainers now, it's like, where are we going with this? I don't know. I'm not 100%, but for some reason this scratched my brain and I thought to bring it up. I'm throwing it out there for the rest of the folks who are looking at things as privacy coins and like, where's that space going forward in 2024? Because like I said before, if you're in the American jurisdiction, the IRS already said, like, we realize that most of the money we can get is from the regular tax folks. The criminals are doing stuff, but it's the regular tax folks that we realize have the money, and we're going to start ramping shit up in 2024. So just throwing that out there. We get into tax season too, so that's another thing to think about, like as far as like the barrage that's about to hit on the privacy coin space. The US and other countries using their financial agencies are definitely going to be putting the pressure on the exchanges. That's a guarantee to happen. All right, next joint. The C-state authorities escalate crackdown on cryptocurrencies. So you see what the name is on the screen. And you know what I've been on my thing about trying to avoid certain words to not get caught up within, you know, the algos as far as how YouTube is, because they transcribe everything now. And so, yeah, whatever on the algos, right? But you see, this is what the C-state's doing. So it basically boils down to, hey, you're not allowed to use Tether to exchange for currencies or other assets within the jurisdiction of the C-state. This article, however, does not cover Taiwan and Hong Kong. If you've been listening to me for the last couple of weeks, I have had a number of stories that have scratched my brain about things going on with Taiwan and their financial instrument sandbox, meaning that CBDC was just pushed off from the C-state in Taiwan, which adds in addition to how Taiwan is the only part of the C-state that you can exit from, like exit as far as like I can go and purchase precious metals and I can leave with it. Hong Kong is the only place that you can do that in a C state. The other place, no, there's no other place, but the other location that somebody might think of is Taiwan, but you can't do that there. Hong Kong specifically has that legal environment around it. So then you have the precious metals, the CBDCs, the paper metals, like the paper trade side stuff. You have other financial instruments, and you have fiat, and you have crypto. How do y'all think this is going to go? And I've been saying this for a couple of weeks. Like, I'm curious to see what gray markets come out of that ecosystem. I'm curious to see how this plays out past 2025. I've been saying it for a while. The C state and the R state are not anti-crypto. They were just doing things to counter. Well, the second part I'm adding on now for clarity. They were doing things to counter/insulate themselves from how they see the West moving. And when I say the West, I primarily mean the US. Again, OFAC is not limited to the US as far as how they look to enforce regulatory policies, right? Other thing to note with this is I think there is another play on capital flight controls. Some of the other smarter folks I listen to are starting to talk about how even though the GDP for C state is moving forward and growing, it is also slowing down. And they had a very big accelerated push in the last couple of years, but now they're in the slowdown, and the housing, the real estate part is a really big part of it. I'm not saying this to you as financial advice. I'm trying to give you the point of how I'm cross-referencing this information. So in my mind, it is a capital flight control because they are doing a slow demolition of their real estate market, and that's going to implode for what it does. And folks who are there are going to look to find ways to move their capital out of the market / out of the country. What the C state is doing is trying to cut they're basically trying to, like, you know how you got a double door and like more people can go out the double door, but when you only have one door open and you put a guard in front of the door, guess what? You've limited the number of people that can exit at one time, and you have a more positive control of who's exiting. That's part of what I think is going on here, because in their way, they are doing something to counter what the West is doing, aka the US, because Tether is an American company, very closely connected on the Wall Street side, 16Z, Andreas Horowitz, all of that fun stuff. And so I think this is that kind of play happening where they're doing capital flight control and they're also doing something to counter how the US is moving. Just throwing that out there like that. If you disagree with me, again, live chat is open. We can have this right now. If not, links for this would be in the description. And hey, if you want to share this stuff, I would have greatly appreciated it, because we're trying to make these numbers do some things in 2024. I know, though, I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and I'm not sorry for that. So on to the next story. BitMining sells BTC.com's mining operation for $5 million. I'll be honest, I don't know how to read this story, as aside from that, it scratched my brain. In my mind, 5 million is a very low amount, considering that they made over 500 million, even though they said they lost like 2-point-something million in last year's operation. And I think they gave the total for how they made in last year, not the year before. So I'm curious, is this something in relation to them expecting the ETF stuff to come out? And are they trying to do something that is less overhead intensive? I'm not the business person. I don't have a MBA or master's in business, but it's just like, well, what's going on? Like, this is a publicly listed company on the NASDAQ. Is it NASDAQ? It's on the New York thing. It's like BTCM, I think, is their indicator. So it's like, what are y'all doing? And how do you plan on still being in the crypto thing as far as the asset itself? I'm wondering, as an indicator, is this them making the move towards the paper side of the trade? Ironically enough, they're not selling the actual website domain. They're just selling the operation. And so, I don't know, like, this is something to keep on the radar. because again, I think that the 5 million was low. And then considering this projection that everyone's making of how the ETF is supposed to make the price skyrocket, if the whole thing is about being able to look good on the stock market and pay out the dividends and pay, the back end investors, like, why would they not have kept it unless they see a more viable, immediate chasing the bag opportunity, which that's what I think is going on here. I think they see a more, quote, immediate chasing the bag opportunity. And they sold it to a company, again, they sold it to a company in Hong Kong. Like, I don't know what to tell y'all, bro. Like, Hong Kong is coming up a lot in stuff. It is, let me just go on to the next thing, y'all. All right, so this joint here. So it's called How EIP 7514 will change Ethereum staking. So when I initially saw this, I thought they were talking about like if you're doing DeFi related stuff, and this is going to be a new protocol thing added into how smart contracts function. But that is not actually what this is about. What this is about the consensus mechanism validator side of it, which basically what it boils down to is there's a uncontrollable influx of entities looking to be validators. Based on how Ethereum's blockchain works now as a consensus mechanism, it is proof of stake, which basically means if you have the capital, whether it be in crypto or in cash, granted you have to stake the Ethereum for it, but if you have easy access to a sizable portion of fiat cash, you buy the crypto and boom, you are now a validator. If you have whatever other crypto, you convert it over, boom, you stake that Ethereum, you are now a validator. And so there is no throttling mechanism as for how that part of the ecosystem functions now to say, all right, today we're only going to do 5 people, and then tomorrow we'll do 5 people. Right now it's like 50 people could get in today, and then tomorrow 100 people can get in. And so what is the issue? And I also think that this article is kind of long, but I also think there's like a level of, I don't want to say misdirection, but it's like what they're arguing sounds like it's a technical challenge. But when you take into consideration that Ethereum does not have a cap on it like Bitcoin does, the question then comes into, because one of the talking points in this article is, if they would have let people just come in when they want to, it was projected that for the rate that they were getting validators at, by some point in next year, at least 50% of Ethereum would be staked in the validator side of the space. Which is then like, all right, but how does that work if y'all don't have a market cap? Like at some point you would probably do something to just make some more, quote. And then the other part of what I think was what in my mind, IMM, part of what they were worrying about, which is like arguably more of the driving factor, is that with X amount of the Ethereum, quote, locked up in staking, they wouldn't have that much out in open circulation, which plays into the thing about what do they call it? Money flow, crypto flow. So basically, like, how is it sitting on this exchange? How many wallets is it sitting in? How many smart contracts is it sitting in? When people exit a smart contract and then bring it back on an exchange, like that whole velocity, crypto velocity, there we go, Ethereum velocity, it was going to affect that, which somebody figured out someplace that's like, oh, this is going to mess with the price. In my mind, what this all boils down to, because it is not a silver bullet in fixing the validator issue, all it is doing is implementing a throttle or a choke point to say, all right, we will have X number of people come in this week or this month. And that's all they're doing. So this is going to have to be revisited again throughout the year, and definitely like for the next 2-3 years. Here's my downside to this. This is me again having my brain scratched the way it does. Don't have to agree with me. I know there's some boys and girls out there for ETH. Live stream comment chat is open, and you can find me on Twitter if you really want to get into it. To me, this brings Ethereum yet another step closer to the idea of being able to censor or being able to control people's access or ability to be able to join the network. Because the way they sell this also is, oh, it's about a security thing. going into the POS, proof of stake, was a security thing. Having the validators do it this way and being able to throttle it to like limit how many people come in a certain period of time, it's a security thing. It helps blah, blah, blah with the network. In my mind, this is arguably one step closer to where, unlike Bitcoin, at least for how it works now, you as a no techie person, average whatever from whatever part of the world you live in, you just get a miner, you start doing what you're doing on the Bitcoin network. If you want to run a node, hey, just have internet connection, good to go. To me, this situation, and not saying the 7514 in particular, I'm saying that it is the bigger thing of the situation brings it one step closer to where at some point in my mind in this decade, the question will come up of what about censoring people or groups or entities from being able to participate in the network. That's my thought process. I might be really dark on this particular thing, but again, looking at it going, code was not law in 2016. X number of the Ethereum-based companies or projects that are building off of Ethereum, whatever layer, especially the ones over here in the US, are kind of following in with OFAC and like things like that. And so it's one of those like, I imagine at a certain point, someone, if someone already hasn't come up with the idea of questioning it, and if someone has, that means they took it beyond that of going, hey, how about we try to figure out a protocol that will work to do this? But how would you blacklist, and what would you blacklist? Is it the address? Is it when you get to the part of digital identity? Like, you know what, let me not run down that rabbit hole, but y'all get where I'm going. I don't know if I see this as a good thing. It sounds like it's helpful, but I don't know if I see long run it's helpful. Just throwing that out there for the technical folks, for the folks who are really into the ETH thing, who want to be a validator, blah, 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 like something to have on your radar. All right, so here is this story. And I said this a couple of stories ago about how countries are going to use taxes, and it's like one of those like, what are you the pro or you the con on? So Nigeria exchanges discouraged by SEC crypto license requirements. This SEC is the Nigerian SEC. It is not the American SEC. It is the Nigerian SEC. And basically what happened is their SEC said, hey, if you are a crypto company, you're an exchange, you got to come get a license. The license is over $500,000, y'all. They did some New York shit for real. They did some New York shit for real. Now, the other thing to note is more than 60% of the Nigerian population is under the age of 30, I believe, or at least 35, right? X amount of the complaint, at least for number of people that I know who are connected to Africa or the various countries in Africa, one way or the other, by birth or by business or by they travel there or they moved there or whatever. One of the things is about how the leadership, who a number of these folks, a number of the African leaders are in the same age range as our folks, if not older, okay? They haven't been the best at doing things for the local people, which is what this situation goes to. Think about this. You're making a license required. All right, cool, we got you, we understand, money laundering, the big T terror, but you're making it damn near what? Because I think a New York bit license is like 150 up to 200K now. They made this joint double and more what it would be if you try to do the business in New York, which in my mind is like, yo, are you pricing your local people out because you know that the foreign investors and companies, those pools will have the money easy. And because of the adoption rate of what it looks like right now for your population, the projections are going to be crazy come 2030 and after for how the velocity and the trading volume will look in that country in particular, because Nigeria is said to be like the leading has the leading population of as far as adoption of crypto go. But the other thing about Nigeria too is when the government tried to ban the fiat money thing, the locals wasn't hearing it. So it's one of those, like, I guess we'll see how this plays out. But I do think that it is kind of messed up that they're not doing things to favor or at least give a balanced playing field to the local entrepreneurs, the local business people, the local user, where instead they're looking at the foreign investors, the foreign companies, and the foreign travelers, right? And arguably too, like, I'm not the biggest fan of protectionism because, like, look what Brazil is doing. Hey, we're going to charge you up to 15% if you use foreign exchanges, but if you use the local ones in Brazil, you're under 10. I think it's like 5. I'm surprised they didn't go in that direction. But again, we'll see how this plays out. Will the local Nigerian population actually, as far as the business segment, will they adopt this? Will they put in new leadership over the year or next year? I don't know when their election cycle is, that would reverse this. I don't know. We'll see. If anybody's a little bit closer to the whole, Nigerian or one of the other countries' situations, hey, comments is open. Let me know. I appreciate the information. I'm always about taking in stuff and, cross-referencing it. And so, yeah, that is the last story. And so where are we going? That was the last story. As I said, it is the new year. This is the first episode of the new year. Hopefully everybody had a safe night. Hopefully everybody was in good company. And this 2024 is going to be kicking, y'all. You already see what's going on, or you're about to see what's going on with the tiger. If you follow me on Twitter, you already seen the post initially. But yeah, last things to say is this episode is brought to you by CJ the Smart Guy. He's a CPA. I'm saying certified twice. I don't know why. But he's a CPA, and we are in the tax season at this point. So whatever y'all out there doing, do your due diligence in finding someone who actually knows and understands and is active in this space as your financial advisor, as your CPA, as your lawyer. I'm not neither of those things. CJ's my CPA, in full disclosure. So there's no kickback. There's no referral links. I'm just sharing his link in the description on this. You do your due diligence in figuring out who you need as we proceed forward into this tax season, because it is going to be real. Again, the IRS already said, we realize that it's the regular tax folks who have more of the money, not the criminals. And the other thing to note is they won a case during the summertime that says that they can look into your financial records if they're investigating someone else and find that you have a connection. And they don't have to tell you about it, and neither does your bank. Just throwing that out there, y'all. Other than that, as I say, have a productive, overbusy day. And at least if it can't be that, at least be in a safe place, in a safe space, and in good company. Bam, there we go. Other than that, y'all, have a good one. And yeah, one.